it's a huge, huge luxury today to be, I found a rare gem. Most dentists think that, they need more training on how to do a root canal filling in a crown. But at least once in your career, or maybe every 15 to 20 years, you have to deal with your facility, your real estate. You got to decide whether to buy a piece of land or buy a building or all this. And I got the guy, Tanner Milne, who probably does 60% of all that in Phoenix, Arizona, which is 4.7 million people in the metro. And my friends that know you, Ryan Isaac and all that, everybody that I've found that talks about you is you're the man, you're a genius in this. This is all you do. This is like talking to an orthodontist who only does braces. This is all you do. So first of all, thanks for giving me an hour of your time. And I feel dumb as an interviewer because I don't really even know what questions I should be asking you. So let's start with first, introduce yourself. How did you get into dentistry? What are common, the low-hanging fruit dental problems and needs when it comes to a facility? And I'm sure everybody's asked you, should they rent, should they own? So I got an hour with you and I don't even know what to ask you. So tell us, how did you get into dentistry and what is it, Tanner, that you actually do?
You bet. Let me give you kind of, I guess, a little bit of a background. So originally I got into the market on the development side, selling buildings. So in the height of the market, there were a lot of doctors and dentists buying these office condos, right?
What year was that? The height of them?
4 or 5. Ramping up. Really 3, 4, 5 were extremely robust and dynamic times in the market. Economy was great. Everyone was buying buildings. Nobody even questioned pricing. There was money aplenty, right? You got money on pro forma, and it was really at that time I interacted with a lot of dentists and saw reoccurring relationships. I saw I saw the same lenders, I saw the same distributors as far as equipment, I saw architects and contractors, and I saw a consistent theme in this team. And it was actually a lender who, this was really about 6, 7, who said, there's really nobody in the Valley that's kind of specialized in this piece, and I could introduce you to a whole new world. So I was already specializing in that space when in 2008 I started Menlo Group Commercial Real Estate, and from there it's just gone gangbusters because we've kind of figured out, and really through the recession, recession hit in 2008, and 9 and 10 were crazy years, and so the value we added to dentists has evolved. I mean, and to the point where the doctor I just mentioned that I just got off the phone with, the strategy there. So, from a perspective of helping these doctors determine, where do they start up and do they start up, and, leasing versus buying, and building versus buying or leasing. But in 9, 10, 11, it was, I owe $1.5 million on my building and it's worth $500,000. What do I do, right? And so I tell people all the time, I felt like I was an oncologist. And literally, I had to look husband and wife in the eye, or partners in the eye, and say, basically you're going to die, and go home and enjoy your family, kind of a thing. But we actually, in any point in the market, we've kind of created strategies where sometimes we probably did a couple dozen where we sold the building off to an investor. They did a short sale, and then this investor leased back the building to the dentist, and he was able to stay there and reduce his debt and operate, as normal. And now his debt service, instead of the $15,000 a month, mortgage payments, etc., it's now a $5,000 a month lease payment. And he just keeps on so that was a strategy then, and it's really trying to identify, well, what's the need? What's the situation? Is it, we do a tremendous amount of lease renewals. And I think a lot of times a dentist that's been in a building for, 10 years, they look at it and say, I'm tired of paying rent. I keep throwing money away. And I look at it and say, well, is that the best thing for your business? Because you got to be business owner over here and real estate investor over here, and they may not be the same role. And so investing in your real estate may not be the best strategy. I surround myself with a great team. So, as far as tax advice and financial advice and lending, I don't make those assessments. I take all the best resources, information I have, and say, you need to make the best decision for your practice. How do you make the most money in the practice? And if it means buying the building, buy the building. And so that's there it goes. Where
And I think that comes from, I think it's the same thing with the mindset of a dentist if he wants to be an associate or own their own practice. I've had so many associates and known so many that were making like $250,000 a year, but they were tired of being an associate. So they had to start their own practice, and then the rest of their life they made 150. So they lost $100,000 a year in income and quadrupled their headaches so they could make $100,000 a year less money. I'll never forget. I was friends with Dan Carney, the founder of Pizza Hut, because I was born in Wichita and lived in the same part of town and same church and all that stuff. And I said, "So, do you want to own all your Pizza Hut land and buildings?" He said, "I would take 10,000 of them and throw them in the bottom of the ocean. I don't want to own land in a building, especially in some small town in Kearney, Nebraska." He says, "Why do I want to own a land in a building in Kearney, Nebraska? I'm a pizza business. That's where the money is." And I also noticed it was interesting in MBA school. They talked about some of the biggest resorts in the world, like Marriott and Hilton or whatever. They'll find an investor to build a $50 million resort, and then they lease it from them. And these guys are publicly traded and awash in cash, and they don't want to own the land and building. So a lot of times dentists want to own their own business and own their own building purely for hormonal, territorial, like you let your dog out in the backyard and he has to go pee on all four corners. And a lot of times that's about the same brain set of wanting to own your own business or own your own land and building. So put on the hat. Should a dentist, well, first of all, do majority of dentists lease or own their building? Do you have any rough estimates on?
Yeah, I would say not just locally, but nationally, you probably have more than 50% lease than own. And I think we went through a period of time where everyone felt like they had to own. And certainly in the Valley, the developers did a great job marketing, basically saying, they would show a stack of rent checks over 10 years and say, you want to throw all that money away. Why are you doing that? You should own your building. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a dentist on a high traffic, high visible, or in a high traffic shopping center, and you're doing $1 million plus, $1.5 million in collections, why on earth would you move? I mean, and that's where I think I'm grateful professionally that I'm at a point in my career where I don't look at, well, where do I make the most money? Because frankly, I make the most money when they move, but every single day. I've had 3 conversations already today where I'm saying, why are you even talking about moving? Because the economics are so favorable, and the risk of moving, I think the variables are so great that why don't you make the best decision for the business? The discretionary income that you have by making money in your practice, you want to be a real estate investor, go buy a shopping center, go buy an apartment complex, invest in REITs. Whatever. I mean, there are ways to invest in real estate, buy single family homes. It doesn't have to be your own building. And sometimes it makes sense because you can be either leasing the, I mean, there's a lot of times where you either lease the building you were in or you own it. And you can underwrite the numbers and say it's just rent replacement, right? If to be in the same facility to pay $5,000 a month in rent or $5,000 a month in a mortgage payment, that's an easier decision. Now, if it's a $2,500 mortgage payment and a $5,000 number rent, those are easy mathematical numbers. So I just want to present the data and say, let's make a calculated decision versus.
And another thing you said is, they were renting in a retail center, and it might have been by a big box Kroger grocery store. Lots of traffic, lots of walk-ins, high visibility. And then they go save money buying some little medical dental building condo or whatever. And they save this rent, but I look a lot of that rent in a high visible areas. Maybe that isn't a rent payment. Maybe that's marketing. maybe you should allot half your rent under marketing and when they say, oh, a dental business should spend 3% on marketing and advertising. Well, maybe if you could be renting for $2,500 and you're renting for $5,000 in a highly visible parking lot that gets 40,000 cars a month, well, maybe in your own mind you should just allot half that rent to marketing and advertising, because because what's going to make the most sense, especially to me, I'm a dentist, is when someone comes in and they broke their tooth or they have a toothache, and I do a $2,500 root canal, billet and crown. That's how I make my money, not on the appreciation of the land and building over 30 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So when when you talk about 50% lease, 50% own a building, is that a different mix of talking to the half the dentists in the urban areas versus half the dentists in the rural? I mean, is it a lot different here in say Phoenix and Scottsdale and Mesa and Gilbert as opposed to you know, Carefree or you know, these Maricopa or Arizona City or Eloy?
Absolutely, and I would say that probably in a majority of markets in a highly dense metro area, whether it's multi-tenant medical office buildings or retail shopping centers, etc., you're by and large you're leasing. It's tertiary markets, it's less dense or more, like you said, rural areas. It makes sense to buy. I mean, you're the hometown dentist, or the home, you know, there's 3 or 4 hometown dentists, and you're in the same place for 25 years. Okay, now we can make justification to why not. But you know what? In a constantly ever-changing market, sometimes you got to move to revitalize the entire operation. And I can show you statistics where someone moves and their collections jump 20-30% because the entire staff, the ambiance has changed, the energy's changed, the excitement's there. So, I mean, do you really want to lock yourself into a 25 or 30-year decision when, I mean, I think that's where the old way of doing of running a dental practice.
So you're saying don't lock your building in for 30 years when your marriage will only last 15. Did I just hear that right? I'm just kidding, trying to be funny. Okay, so let's start with the lease part. What does, and I'm not even smart enough to ask you, I don't even know what question to ask. So tell the viewers what they should be thinking about when they're approaching a lease.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the first lease, and then let's talk about the lease renewal process, because we get involved in a lot of deals where, you know, the lease was signed 5, 7, 10 years ago, and then we're involved in the new process, because a lot of times, and dentistry is very unique, there's a lot more transition in dental practices than you see in, you know, medical specialty or even medical family practice offices, where there's not the same transition of people buying and selling. And as you know, there's a lot of velocity where a guy will work a practice for 3 to 5 years and then decide to sell it, not necessarily because he just created a bunch of value and there's upside and wants to pull equity out. It's just maybe they're getting bored. I just tend to see a lot of velocity, and so it's really going.
And you think more so in dentistry than medicine?
Correct.
And what is that based on? Just what you see or numbers?
Well,
or
oddly enough, you don't see the same valuations in medical practices. People aren't. You know, and I know every market, people have different valuations, whether it's a percentage of collections or it's a multiple on EBITDA or whatever the valuation methodology is. Dentists are willing to buy goodwill and a stream of revenue, whereas you don't see that in medical.
And they don't advertise either.
No, correct.
Because with Medicaid and Medicare and all that, the margin is so low and the supply of patients so high, it's not really a business.
Right.
I mean, they got in bed with the government in 1962, and if you get in bed with anybody, you're going to get screwed. And the Medicaid and the Medicare, you're right, you don't ever see them advertising. Only a healthy business advertises. So you see a lot of dentists, veterinarians, chiropractors, because they can grow and build a healthy business. But medicine, ever since it got in bed with Medicare, it's not really a business. Too many patients, you don't have enough time, the reimbursements is so low, it's just you just go in there and get exhausted all day.
It's true.
Yeah.
So going into initial lease, it's really, you kind of want to begin with what's your exit strategy. And I think every dentist would go into a new deal saying, well, I'm going to be here for 20 years. But we want to structure the lease such that they do have escapes. And some of just the basic things that we look at that, and I'll give you an example of a deal I reviewed last Thursday or Wednesday. So, we look at, for example, in a shopping center, and a lot of these are very shopping center or multi-tenant building specific, but a relocation clause. Can the landlord relocate you because they have a bigger tenant, better tenant? And so the question really becomes, did you go to that location for the view, the signage, the whatever, right? But what I would say 80% of the leases I review have a relocation clause in it, that the landlord can relocate you to a substantially similar location. And that's detrimental to the dentist.
So you're saying, okay, so let's say I went next to a big Fry's or Safeway or Walgreens, and the Walgreens wants to expand its size, and for that to happen, you mean they need to get rid of that little dentist taking 2,000 square feet? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. But
and then
you're on, let's say you went to that space because it was the corner, great visibility to, the corner of Main and Main, and they say, oh, we have another location on the other side of the shopping center, same size, same deal, we'll even rebuild it for you. It's not the same deal, right? Not the same space. In fact, you may not have even gone to the shopping center if that were the space you were going to get, right? Mm-hmm. But they can do that, and they do it.
And for clarity purposes, I want to say that in Phoenix there is no Main and Main. I think that would be. I think even the civil engineer. I never heard Main and Main. I always heard first Main. So you're saying to avoid the relocation clause, or you just for your clients you take that out?
Get that out. Get the relocation clause out.
Okay, get the relocation clause out.
And there's a piece. I'll tell you, with dentists, I encounter this all the time. Personal guarantees. So again, shopping center landlord gives, $60,000 to the tenant for improvements in their space. So they're getting $60,000 out of the total build-out cost of $200,000. But the landlord requires a full personal guarantee. And in fact, those personal guarantees typically endure in perpetuity. So throughout any renewal period. And at least a dozen times, I've gotten a call from a dentist that has since sold his practice and says, hey, I got a call from the landlord, and they say I'm a guarantor, and the tenant's in default, and they're coming after me. And so the real question just becomes, what does your guarantee obligate you to? And how long should it endure? Does it just endure for the overall cost to the landlord? And so what I look at and say, I get it. A landlord should get some guarantee because they just gave you $60,000. They gave you free rent, and they've borne costs to do that deal, right? But that doesn't mean you need to guarantee the lease for the next 20 years, and you're personally liable for that, for the term of that deal.
And it reminds me always what the old famous saying, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know, and some of us don't even know what we don't know. And dentists, physicians, and lawyers have a high tendency to think they basically know almost everything, and they're not humble people. And when I look at the entrepreneur millionaires, Harvard Business Review just did an article last month saying when they studied the most successful CEOs in big, medium, small companies, humility seem to be the most highest incoming trait of the most successful CEOs, because a humble person will listen, a humble will ask advice, a humble will listen to the customers, the employees. Humble people listen and learn. It's arrogant, know-it-all physicians, dentists, lawyers, and I mean, why would I have to have Tanner read my lease? I'm a doctor and you're not. And now I hear they're calling back 20 years later and they're a personal guarantee on a defaulting tenant. By the way, Tanner, you represent the dentist or the real estate person in your business, or do you do both?
Yeah, our firm does both. Correct.
And then you disclose that to the dentist if you're representing the dentist.
It's very, very infrequent that we would represent both parties.
And can you represent somebody outside of Arizona, or is that a licensed thing and you can only do Arizona?
Yeah, I have done negotiate, because really there's kind of different roles to what we do. Now, a lot of people look at us as realtors, space finders. That's all we do is find space for dentists. But what we say, that's a really small part of the job. In fact, anyone that has access to the data can find space. It's really taking people through a process and really the intelligence of the negotiation and the negotiation process, framework, training, and experience. Really, I've completed over 1,000 transactions. So really, to say every time I haven't seen it all, because I'll tell you a situation. Doctor ready to sign a lease last week. It comes back. Attorney's already reviewed it. The dentist attorney's already reviewed the lease. And he says, I'm ready to go. I want to sign by Friday. So this is Wednesday of last week. And I said, you know what? Let me just go through it one more time to make sure everything's there. And again, my job is just to find the space, right? And I go through it. There's this section 8.2 called alteration. And it essentially says that 30 days prior to the lease expiration, should the landlord so choose, they can require the tenant what was the language? It was basically put the space back to whatever form they so desire. And literally the word desire is, what is that? Back to gray shell, vanilla shell. I mean, and that could have been $20,000 to $40,000 at the end of the lease. The landlord could say, oh, by the way, we just leased the space to a pizza guy and we like it back in XYZ condition. I mean, that's what the lease said. So I saw that and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Right? Where I think a lot of times the dentists push back because I see this clause and I'm like, you agreed to this, 7 years ago, where now I'm trying to prevent it on the front side. And they're like, well, what landlord wouldn't want my TIs, right? I just improved the landlord's space. Well, not if you're a shopping center owner and you're going to put Domino's Pizza into your space. They don't care about your dental build out.
So tell me this, tell me a couple things logistically. The whole goal of Dental Town was that with dentaltown.com, no dentist would ever have to practice solo again. So that dentist might be walking in that space. How much space does an average dentist rent? I mean,
solo practitioner?
Yeah.
Typically between 18 and 2,400 square feet. Now that really,
1,800 to 2,400. Right. And what would be the largest and the small? What would be the standard deviation +3, -3 in your 1,000 plus transactions
of the single dentist?
Yeah,
I would say you're probably 18 to even 19 to 21 that's probably the tightened range. I mean, I've seen deals as low as 12 to 1,400 square feet, and really I think people are starting to tighten their belt. 7-8 years ago, the solo dentist was always looking 25 plus because they needed the extra office and they needed the big oversized bathroom and shower and the huge break room where you make a lot of money in your break room, right? So I mean, it's those things to say you got to run a comfortable office, but at the end of the day, I'm trying to help these guys see that they got to make money.
Well, what I always remind the dentists is it's common to make fun of, you always hear people making fun of poor people who live in a very squalor condition, but they're driving a $30,000 car. And you say, when your car is worth more than your home, that doesn't seem right, And I've told many a kids in my practice over 28 years, I've walked some of them out to their car because they wanted to show me their car. And they walked me out there to show me this $30,000 monster truck, or it's a purple lowrider from Guadalupe, and it's just all decked out. And I always put my arm around and say, if you would have sent this money to DeVry and went to school for 18 months, you'd have a job with healthcare and dental, and that's going to make all those single girls more attracted to you than a $30,000 monster truck or a $30,000 purple lowrider that's doing this in my parking lot. You know what I mean? And a lot of the dentists, when I see their 5,000 square foot home and then their small little 1,500 square foot office in a horrible location, I'm like, dude, that's backwards. When you're, why you're if you could have had a better location or a better business, I mean, shouldn't your business earning you all your money be more of where your finances than your consumption? You know what I mean? It's like, why do you have a boat and an RV and you don't have a digital x-ray system? You know what I mean? So it's kind of backwards. Right. But back to, so this individual's out there and he's hearing Tanner saying, the 18 to 2400, a little tighter, 19,000, 2,000. Tell me this. You talked about covenants. You hear a lot of dentists ask if they can get a covenant that no other dentist can come in here and compete. Is that legal? Is that common?
Very common. Yeah, that's another one. Exclusive use. So to get an exclusive, especially in a shopping center or these office condos or multi-tenant office buildings, it's very uncommon to get. But if you're a specialist, no question, you should get an exclusive use or a covenant not to. I mean, it's not a non-compete, but it's an exclusive use provision.
You're
And
saying
really,
it's more important for a specialist than a general dentist?
no, 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 no. I'm just saying that if a specialist goes into a property that has 3 general dentists, right, and they're going in there because they see an in-place referral source, they better ensure they get an exclusive use. If you're in a shopping center, there's no reason you shouldn't get an exclusive use. Although I've seen situations where they don't have an exclusive use, or the provision is called preferential use, or we won't lease to another dentist unless they're this big or they're this type of company. And I've seen where the small 1,800 square foot dentist that's in line shops is thinks he's secure, and then the landlord puts Pacific Dental Services right out on the front of the building because they were bigger than that language restricted to. And so you really got to think about, well, what are your risks? Because why are you going into the shopping center paying extremely high rent if then your competitor is going to be right out in front of you?
So if I'm a general dentist, would I want an exclusive to where even
Yes.
specialists couldn't go in?
It depends. And I've negotiated where I almost to the point where it's put me in a tough spot where I put a general dentist in a space and get him an exclusive on any type of dentistry, and then a pediatric dentist says, hey, I'd love to be right next door. I think that'd be a great thing. But the general dentist would have to be the one to say to the landlord, I'm okay with him coming in and relinquishing the exclusive on pediatric.
So you've done that before?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. And since you brought up corporate dentistry, I don't like the term corporate dentistry because almost every individual dentist I know who's a solo is incorporated. So what do you call it? I call it big chain dentistry, or what do you call it?
I guess DMO or DSO or
DSO, Dental Service Organization. So how do you? What are they doing? Do they buy their land and building? Are they leasing?
They all lease. They all lease. In fact,
They all lease.
I don't work with Pacific Dental Services, but what I understand is they see so much value in the locations that they'll pay more rent than anybody in town. I mean, because when you really look at, you made the comment about Domino's Pizza. Retailers look at visibility as just like Walgreens does. It's a cost of doing business. It's another line item, and they can attribute some of it to marketing exposure and say we got to be in the best locations. And when I'm representing, Dr. Johnson into a shopping center, and I'm trying to get the lowest rent, the most amount of TIs, the most amount of free rent, guess what? I'll get blown out every day by Dunkin' Donuts or Five Guys or Jimmy John's. I mean, some of these retailers, because they'll pay 40% more than I'm trying to negotiate because they want the location that bad, and they'll pay more than list price because they look at it as, I'm going to do 3 to 5 million in sales in that location, and that's just what it is. And that's what Pacific Dental Services, they pay so much higher rent than anyone else on a price per foot basis, but they pay for the best locations.
Yeah, and that Jimmy John's, I have 4 boys, so I probably gave them 1 million of that 3 to 5 million. I mean, I can cook them a complete dinner, and 1 hour later, they drive down to Jimmy John's. I mean, it's what they can eat is amazing. So, Tanner, when you're talking to these tenants, I've heard some landlords say, at the end of the day, you're lucky I'm dealing with the dentist, because the dentist doesn't really do anything for my shopping, where if it had a Jimmy John's or a Dunkin' Donuts or a Starbucks next to my grocery store, that would make the center more attractive. But having a dentist or an endodontist or a pediatric dentist, that's really not the optimum ideal mix. Do you hear that when you're dealing with the rentals, or is it just money?
No, all the time. In fact, part of part of the negotiation is being able to tell a compelling story. And I think a lot of retailers, they almost need to be reminded that these businesses, these other businesses are very cyclical. They're fat. It's a fad. I mean, frozen yogurt, right? Let's use frozen yogurt as the key. I mean, so if I'm negotiating a dental deal, I will say, let's keep in mind this is not a frozen yogurt place. And although so I'll get pushback because we know, especially in the Phoenix market, I mean, you have certain markets that got hit really hard by the recession. There were a lot of dentists that didn't make it, but still statistically, the default rate is significantly lower than any other industry or business. And so the stability of a dental office is exponentially greater than the Joe's Five Guys Pizza Brothers, right? Or whatever. The local pizza shop, but even the nationals. I mean, I just got to find the examples because I think about Quiznos, right? Quiznos was a great national brand. I can tell you, at least in the valley here, I mean, they've blown out at least a dozen locations.
What's blown out mean?
They defaulted.
Okay, and that's called a blown out?
Yeah, well, that's what I call it.
Okay, so they defaulted, and is that because Firehouse Subs and Jimmy John says?
Well, yeah, I think there's always a new latest and greatest concept that's the hot concept, and it's hot for 2 years, and then it fizzles out. And so these franchise models, they become attractive to these landlords, and I think the argument of publicly traded national is not the same story that it used to be, because even if you've read Jim Collins' Good to Great.
Yes, my favorite book, my all-time favorite book, Jim Collins' Good to Great. How the Mighty Fall, Built to Last. Right. His last one was what was the blue one called?
Great by Choice.
Great by Choice. Yeah, those are my 4 all-time favorite books of all time. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, you're good. But even companies that were on that list are gone. Circuit City, right? Gone. And so I think to say these are companies that can endure the test of time. Well, look, have you read the book Black Swan?
No.
It's a black swan. It's the 9/11, right? Who could have predicted? No one predicted 9/11, right?
Right.
Or a turkey. A turkey doesn't ever predict Thanksgiving Day. It just life is good until the day it's not, right?
Right.
And so it's helping these landlords understand, look, Dr. Johnson, he could default, but statistically the default rate is, it's less than 1%.
I mean, remind the viewers that publicly traded stocks on Wall Street in 1900, only one, General Electric, was still trading at the year 2000. So all the greatest companies in the world were all gone except for GE, which kind of freakishly had a couple of weird geniuses. One was the Thomas Edison founder. Then the other one was that Jack Welch super manager, who's wrote, I loved his book too. What was that? From the Gut by Jack. Oh, got it. Jack Welch, From the Gut. But other than GE, the whole Fortune 500's gone, which also makes me wonder, I'm 52. When I got out of school, there was a publicly traded Orthodontic Centers of America on the New York Stock Exchange and a dozen companies on NASDAQ. And then I watched 10 years later, they were all busted and gone. And then it was 10 years of silence, and now they're all back again. Heartland Dental and Pacific and all this. And an old guy like me who's 52 is thinking, I kind of seen this before. And everybody's saying, oh, it's all different. It's all different. They say it's different at the top of every real estate stock market bubble, real estate bubble. Remember the 2000, the internet was going to change everything and these companies would be endlessly profitable for eternity. And then NASDAQ went from 5,800 to 1,200. And so the reason I don't trust any of the corporate chains first, because when you've been doing Dentistry 28, I've already seen this before. They all came up and they all exploded, and I'm seeing the same red flags. And the red flags in the first time was they would buy your practice and you had to work there for 5 years. On the 5 year and 1 second, all the founders ran. And I'm seeing that again this time. So, when Warren Buffett buys your company, the founders all stay till they die. But with the big change, the founders all leave the second they legally, contractually can get the hell out of there. So to me, isn't that a huge red flag? I mean, the business is people, time, and money, and your people only stay with you when they're contractually, the lawyers say you have to for money. And then the minute it goes to, well, I'm free to go, and they all fly out the cage. God, I'm predicting, I'm 52. I think by 62, I'm fully predicting this is the same thing. You know what I mean? I mean, what's the difference in the story? So you talked about.
Can I make a comment about that though?
No.
One thing.
No.
I'm going to anyway. But the one thing that I mean, you commented at the very beginning about these associates. I think a lot of times these guys don't confront the brutal facts. Another Jim Collins, right? Plug. Is there are some guys, and I'm not advocating for corporate dentistry or DSOs or DMOs, but there are dentists that are clinicians that are not meant to be business owners, and they think that they've given in, or they've waved their flag in the air and said, I'm a failure if I don't go into private practice and own my own practice. But it's just, I mean, I've over and over, I've seen guys where they just are not cut out for business ownership. And so, I'm not advocating for the specific corporate models. However, I think there are dentists, especially, that are listening to this podcast, that need to understand it's okay that you're not a great business owner. And unfortunately, I hate to see the guys that make $1 million decision to realize I don't have the grit, the gut, the staying power, whatever it is, right, to be a business owner, and that's okay. We're not here to say everyone is a perfect fit for me, because sometimes I'm working with an associate that thinks that that's what he's supposed to do, and maybe he's getting pushed by by a vendor, and I look at him, I say, really, you're making $300,000 as an associate? What? Do you really want to be a business owner? Do you really have what it takes? Do you really want to be processing books and dealing with staff and all that other stuff that comes with business ownership? And they're like, you're right.
It reminds me of a change in thinking from when I was got out of college to now. When I was in college, I used to formally teach you that there were geniuses, that the smartest guy ever lived was Sir Isaac Newton, who invented calculus in 1687, and then there was Albert Einstein, and I'll call bullshit. So Sir Isaac Newton invented calculus when no one else was doing math, and he made a bunch of money with his book, and he invested it in the first stock market bubble that popped of all time. Do you know what they were trading in back then in 1687? Tulip bulbs. Remember that one? It was the first, and tulip bulbs just kept doubling and doubling in price. Sir Isaac Newton put all of his money in tulip bulbs and lost it all and died a pauper. You can also tell that by when they say it costs you an arm and a leg, because before cameras, everything was painting, and the painting was paid by the piece. So you can go back in time and see if someone was rich. If they were really rich, it'd be a full body painting, and including their bird dog and maybe their wife and kids. But Sir Isaac Newton is just a picture of his face. So he only had enough money to have his head painted. And then Albert Einstein got like $1 million for his Nobel Prize in physics, and he had to give it to his ex in a divorce, who was his first cousin. And so what I say about the business owner is that I think they feel bad because they think they should be smart in that, or they're not smart in that, or it's a failure. And what the neural anatomists are telling us is that if they look at the brains of 100 ants or 100 monkeys or 100 humans or 100 dolphins, we all have the same brain. What makes you smart is if you're interested in something. And if business is really exciting, like you and I have both read all the Jim Collins books. Whereas this other guy, he might be deer hunting or elk hunting, or maybe he's involved with his kids' Boy Scouts. He's just not interested in it. So if you're just not genuinely like want to read business books, then you probably shouldn't be a businessman. Follow it's not that you're dumb or should feel guilty, or you're just saying, well, if I can do a root canal, I should be able to figure out this business. Your brain is the same as everyone else, and you're only going to figure out what you're interested in. Like, I just saw a violinist the other day, and everybody said, oh my God, afterwards, people walking in the car like, oh my God, she's such a musical genius. I'm like, no, she's not. She played violin 4 hours a day for 25 years. Do you want to do it? I'm asking you, Ryan, do you want to play violin 4 hours a day for a quarter century? Nope. No, it doesn't mean your brain is missing a part of its bulb. You got a ping pong sized part of your brain missing where the music center goes. You're just not interested. And I think if dentists are interested in marketing and advertising and HR and attracting and retaining staff and doing quarterly interviews and looking at marketing and websites, if that just doesn't fuel them, then they shouldn't do it. And I can give you the names of 100 people who used to make $250,000 a year as an associate, now making $100,000 a year and very miserable, owning all these problems. And you see that, Dennis. When there's something going on with the staff, they just go in their private office and shut the door. I mean, have you ever been watching an NFL football game and they're losing, so the head coach just like runs and goes, back into the tunnel and goes in his office and shuts the door? I mean, obviously the person isn't built for managing. We talked about leasing. Is there any more covenants that you should talk about in the lease? You said there's a difference between the lease and the lease renewal. Explain.
Well, and so with the lease renewal, it just means that, I mean, certainly we can improve and focus on the economics, but I think one mistake that dentists make is they focus only on the economics. They don't even think about the fact that they still have this relocation clause, and they still have a personal guarantee, and they don't have a death and disability clause, and they don't have the ability to assign and transfer their lease when they sell the practice. And that's actually one that we didn't even get to, is when you do sell the practice, most leases don't allow you to just assign those to the guy that buys the practice or group or whoever. And so when you have the time of negotiation is really the only time that you have any leverage, right? Not the time that you have your $800,000 offer to buy your practice and you go to your landlord and say, hey, I've got a buyer and he wants to close in 3 weeks. Can I assign the lease to him? And they say, no. What are you going to give me for it, right? Because why? I mean, if I'm a shopping center owner, why would I say, oh yeah, no problem, happy to do it for you, right?
Yeah, what's in it for you?
Yeah. And so it's really just in that lease renewal process, understanding, well, what things need to be improved upon, because it's the only time you have any leverage. And that's where I guess, constantly I hear from I talk to dentists and they're like, I don't really need you. I'm not moving. And I'm like, that's not what I do, is move people. That's a part of what I do. But you need to, just like you do audits in your business, or you do quarterly reviews or annual reviews on your financials, are you doing reviews and understanding what's your real estate strategy? Are you, I mean, is the location still viable for your practice? I mean, have the demographics shifted? Are all your patients driving from 5 miles away? And so if you moved 5 miles closer to where your patients are coming from, it's really just understanding how the real estate plays a role in the business.
Ryan, how far can a dentist move without it having a material impact on their existing patients?
That's a great question. And I've always said that anything more than 5 miles, unless it's to get into a new demographic or leave a demographic that you don't want to be a part of anymore. 3 miles is probably the outer edge from my recommendation.
And is it true? I mean, back in the day, I question, back in the day, they used to say that neighborhoods were about 100-year cycle. You'd build out an area like a brand new area like Ahwatukee or Gilbert, and then it was the new hot thing, and then 50 years it was kind of the top of its value, and then it starts turning into renters, and about 100 years later it's all crack homes and bulldozers hit it and it's all gone. Is that 100-year cycle still there, or did master plan communities change that? Or I mean, do you ever talk to a dentist like, okay, you're going to this neighborhood and you're 25, but it's kind of at the top of the cycle, and if you stayed here till 65, it's just going to be homeless shelters and buying drugs on the corner, or is that not relevant in your mind?
That's where I guess my opinion is, I don't think you should make a 25-year decision and really be looking at it between a 5 and 10-year decision, because at the end of the day, as long as you're looking at whatever investment you put into the space on a 10-year horizon, if the market's changed, that's why you move. And that's where I think you buy the building and you become attached to that location, that demographic. But if the space is no longer viable, well, then move it. Revitalize.
So what I'm hearing for you, a major takeaway, is that if you're in Eloy or Arizona City or a small town, and you're born and raised in this town, and you're going to have your family in this town, you're going to die in this town, yeah, it probably makes sense just to buy your own land and building and put it on the corner of Main Street and Main Street and do the thing. But if you're in a urban area where things change, developments come and go, neighborhoods are going up or down, You're right. Nobody in Wall Street makes 10, 20, 30-year projections. They barely, project owning the land and building.
True. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then, do you want to switch to owning land and building? What you're doing for clients?
Well, I think the methodology in the process is the same, in the sense that we want to take them through a process so that the criteria, essentially the weighted matrix, answers their question, their decision. So, I mean, because it really is always a lease versus buy comparison. And if a dentist has been leasing for 10 years and knows they want to buy a building, the process is just taking them through the typical real estate transaction, identifying the best location, whether it's an existing building or a new build. But I'm working with a dentist right now who actually has already bought a piece of land to build a building. He's in an existing space, makes money there, has a great practice, over $1 million in collections, and the cost to build is now over budget. And he's like, "What do I do?" And I'm saying, "Hold up. You haven't started construction yet. Let's go back to what we originally started with. 3 strategies: renew and stay, relocate and lease, or move forward with the buy and build." He's already bought the land again. So just in the last week, we've kind of gone through this process, and we've now submitted a renewal to his existing landlord, and we've submitted a new lease on a space down the street that's a vibrant shopping center, great visibility and access. And so then once those numbers come back, I can put all 3 in a spreadsheet, and he can see what the numbers look like, and the decision will essentially be made through the economics.
And you and I both have an MBA from Arizona State University, and that's I know where you're getting that from, the decision making course, where they taught decision making, that the biggest error in decision making is it's not the square, what decision at hand, or the triangle of what you decided. It's you didn't fill out all your circles. You didn't know all your options, and to make better decisions, you need to fill in your options. And it sounds like I see, no deal is much better than a bad deal. But when humans buy the land, now it goes from their brain to their heart. They've emotionally committed. They've owned the land. They just got to keep going forward. When a brain like yours is saying, well, let's stop. You bought the land. That's sunken costs. Maybe we shouldn't go further. Maybe we should try to sell that land. I mean, just because you bought the land doesn't mean you're committed to this thing. I mean, so you're having exit strategies all the way down the line. And I'd also like to remind our viewers, the one thing they taught us both in MBA schools: never let your money get too far from cash. And when you're making cash and you have money in stocks, bonds in the bank, you have access to that liquid pretty much now. But when you own a dental office, I've seen dentists try to sell their dental office, and 4 years later, they don't have any buyers, especially in the rural areas. So, owning your land and building is nice, but when everybody's telling you it's worth $1 million, I have to ask you, yeah, well, how long would it take to convert that to cash?
Right.
Because I can convert $1 million of stocks or bonds to cash in an hour on the New York Stock Exchange, but you cannot do that with a dental office. Now, I'm seeing that with houses too. The only houses really liquid in Arizona are maybe 2,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. But once you start getting into 5,000 square foot homes, most of them don't even get an offer in a year.
Right? Absolutely.
So that big $1 million home is basically just a big illiquid asset, right?
Well, let me insert one more thing with that, and that's where, again, watching markets shift and change. So now a strategy we're presenting to dentists that own their buildings is to say, why don't we sell your building before you sell the practice? Sign a lease back with yourself, and so now we can sell your building to an out-of-state investor, a foreign investor, because they're buying the annuity, and then you can sell your practice, and you don't have to worry about the real estate. Because what's happening is when you're trying to sell your practice and your building together, the dentist that wants to buy, they're not able to qualify, and then the DMOs, the DSOs, the regional corporates, or the dentists with multiple locations, they're not buying the real estate anyways. So you have the highest and best exit strategy to sell your real estate is to sell it to an investor on a cap rate. And that's, again, taking them all the way through this evaluation where I can show them if you sell it as a improved dental office versus if you sell it as an annuity to an investor, look at the difference in sales price. And so we're always unlocking opportunities to say, well, what's the best strategy for where the market is? I mean, we went through a recession, now we're coming out, and so sometimes it's renew, sometimes it's for a dentist, it's sell your building early, sell it now, keep it, hold it. You know, I mean, it all depends on it's not that one size fits all for everybody.
Tanner, a lot of people are afraid to talk to you or go start a lease or whatever because they think, God, I'm carrying $300,000 of student loans. I probably don't even have access to capital. I probably couldn't even get a lease signed. I mean, once they find out I got $250,000 in student loans, they're probably just going to laugh. What is access to capital like today for kids with $300,000 of student loans?
I mean, unless there's a derogatory, you know, I guess credit history, meaning short sale, foreclosure, bankruptcy, the access to capital is the same as it's always been.
Really?
Yes.
Even carrying $300,000 student loans, a landlord's not going to say, oh my gosh, run. You're seeing access to capital.
Correct.
Now, are you involved in practice transitions at all, or do you work with people?
We are, yes. In fact, just in October of 2014, we launched a separate division of our company that does practice transitions.
And who's doing that for you? Is that you or someone else?
No, someone else, yes.
Okay. And does that, and you work with that person?
I do, yeah. We're business partners, but he's the day-to-day, and I'm just.
Well, have you asked him what it's like access to capital for a person with student loans?
So on the acquisition side, criteria's changed slightly, but I mean, in some markets, you know, the lending criteria was they would fund 100% of last year's collections, where now those percentages are declining. And I'm probably not the best to answer all those questions because I'm not in it day to day, but it's my understanding is the criteria for practice acquisitions has certainly changed.
Ryan, you have an MBA from ASU. You could answer any question.
Tanner.
I mean, Tanner. What did I call you?
Ryan.
Ryan? Oh, I'm sorry. Your friend is Ryan.
Yes,
Ryan Isaac.
Right.
I'm sorry. But like I say, we talked about personal guarantee, relocation clause, assignment and transfer, exclusive use, death and disability, options to renew, alterations. Okay, we didn't talk about hours of operation and death and disability. You didn't say exactly what that meant. So can you cover those two?
So to have a clause in the lease that says in the event of a disability or a death, that there's the tenant, the dentist has options. And because the problem is if you don't create options, whether that's sell your practice or sell the charts alone, or I mean, certainly if I became disabled if I was a dentist and I became disabled as a dentist, no longer able to practice, I would love the ability to get out of that lease due to that event. And the same, I would want my beneficiaries of my estate to be able to get out of that lease, because if you sign a personal guarantee, that obligates essentially your wife as well, or your spouse, you know, and so it allows you to sell the charts to the guy across the street if that's the best exit strategy, rather than be bound to that lease that causes problems.
So what I'm hearing is if you hate your spouse, do not put in a death and disability clause. Is that what I'm hearing, Ryan? Or Tanner? Is that what I'm hearing, Tanner? If you're mad at your spouse when you're signing this lease, take out that death and disability and just, you know. So when you put in that death and disability, what percent of the time does the landlord go with that? That says, if I die, I'm out of this lease.
You know what? They're almost always willing to do it. It becomes less negotiable when you have 2 or 3 partners in a practice because it's less important.
Okay, and then what are hours of operation?
What it means is, I mean, a lot of these leases have specific hours that you have to continuous operation. So for example, you are in default if you've been continuously closed for more than 5 days. People, you know, dental offices close for the holidays for a week at a time. You go on vacation or what have you, and to think that you're in default on your lease and you could be evicted because of being outside those hours, or some say you must be open from up till 10 p.m. at night, or they give you specific hours that you can or cannot be opened. And so those are things to just really pay attention to, because I've seen a lot of defaults as a result of something menial, hours of operation.
So Tanner, you were saying that the big corporate chains like Pacific Dental Care, owned by Steve Thorne, or they really take location importantly.
Correct.
Can you tell us attributes of a great location that a big smart? What in their mind is like, this is rocking hot, I want to be here?
Visibility from the street, so monument signage, building signage, access. And when I say access, meaning it's easy to get it right in, right out, easy to get into, left turn. You don't have to do U-turns. I mean, access is key. You want to be on a fairly major arterial. So as far as
4-lane road,
correct,
instead of 2-lane.
Depending on what you are, if you're a general practitioner, being close to a major freeway is not imperative. But for a specialty, I mean, you want to look at freeway access. You want to look at amenities, whether it's major employers or retail amenities. I mean, those things are important to not only the practice, but what other components are driving traffic to the area specifically. And
also, Tanner, in the 28 years I've been doing this, it seems like a lot of dentists think going into a big hustling, bustling mall, an indoor mall, was the hot thing. And I mean, going back, 25 years ago, there were dentists in every mall, but it seems to me, maybe I'm a poor sample size, but it seems to me that those are kind of faded away. And I was wondering, did those fade away because the mall said, I'd rather have a Gap store or a Victoria's Secret than, a dentist? Did it go away because they wanted better clients for their mix, or did it go away because it wasn't working for the dentist?
That's a great question that I don't know that I have the absolute answer for. However, my opinion is, having worked with mall operators, they're looking for the credit tenants, the public companies, because what they do is they negotiate on packages. For example, they basically will go to a retailer, a Gap store, and say, if you want Santa Monica Mall, you got to take the mall in Gilbert and the mall in Arrowhead and the mall in Salt Lake City and the mall in or whatever, right? And so they basically say, if you want this one, you got to take the rest of them. And that's how they negotiate and structure those deals.
So you're saying that they probably aren't, the dentists probably, the reason I don't see them in malls anymore is probably they're probably not successful at getting in?
Well, not only that, maybe I don't know if the model hasn't proven viable or not. I think
because I always thought, and again, that's just my deal. I would think it'd be horribly inconvenient to have to go to a mall and walk across a parking lot and all that to go get my teeth cleaned.
Well, you'd think if being in a grocery anchored center versus the mall, you'd think you'd have fairly comparable access to eyeballs and traffic as you would the mall. It's just the access, convenience, and visibility is significantly greater.
Okay, so I only got you for 1 minute and 50 seconds. So, Ryan, Tanner, what is your big close? Give your big close about what they should be thinking about. What would be their food for thought? And then also, are they allowed to contact you? I mean,
Absolutely. Please contact me. And I would say,
how would they contact you? Are you brave enough to get? I mean, email? Do you have a website?
Yeah, email, website, menlocre.com, menlocre.com.
And what is Menlo? That's the name of the company, or is that someone's name?
Name of the firm. No, name of the firm.
menle.com.
No, menlocre.com.
Okay, and what's CRE stand for?
Commercial real estate.
Okay, and then how could someone email you?
Tanner, TANNER at Menlo, menlocre.com.
Can you set up a temporary email account for Ryan at that number, just since I only called you that 3 times?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's an inside joke, guys, because we were introduced by a good friend named Ryan. And what about phone calls? Are they allowed to call you? Or
yeah, please. 480
wow.
659 1777.
And say that phone number one more time.
480 659 1777.
And I'm going to put that all in the note. So Ryan, I have 1 minute left. What's their close for everything you know in 1 minute?
Any market anywhere, please don't do a deal without advice, expert advice, whether that's me, my firm, or someone, you should be able to get free advice in processing your decision before you just go ahead and sign whatever that is that's in front of you. Don't make these catastrophic mistakes that we see day in and day out without someone saying it's a good deal, that's a fair deal, you're okay to sign that.
And if I was a dental school dean on graduation day, as those kids were coming up to get their diploma, I'd say to everyone, congratulations, young man or woman, you're a doctor of dental surgery, but remember, you don't know shit about anything else. Get professional help on all these transactions, because just because you're a dentist and you think you know it all, I love your confidence, I love your self-esteem, but come on, dude. There's at the end of the day, there's gravity. And someone like Tanner can show you the gravity. Tanner, I want to go out while I got you on leverage. Now I got you on YouTube. Do you think you'd ever build us an online course on Dentaltown? We put up 300 courses on Dentaltown. They've been viewed 600,000 times. Do you think someday maybe you or your transition team could create an online CE course?
Yes, we've got a great presentation that just specifically on commercial real estate and even just things to know. It's all just value-added content. Don't make these mistakes, because I see them every day.
Now I know the guys like you and Gilbert won't come down to Ahwatukee because we're just kind of trailer trash over here. But all you got to do is come down to Ahwatukee, 40th and I. I'd love to show you the team, the graphics team. I'd love to get a course on that, because like I say, this isn't a decision that they do very often. They mostly do root canals, fillings, and crowns, but this is a huge decision. People, yes. Time, and money. It's a big money decision. So when that dentist is dealing with a 5-year lease or a renewal or whatever, I'd sure like him to have more access to guys like you.
Appreciate it. I'll reach out. We'll get together for sure.
All right, and then also, why should I read that book? Should our viewers read Black Swan? And if so, why?
No, don't read it.
Don't read it.
It's very intense, and you can find all the same principles. And I mean, I'm reading Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath right now, and it brings in a lot of the same components.
Okay.
I try and read one book a month, and I'd be happy to start sharing my best reads with you, because it sounds like we got books in common.
Well, you know what? Go on Dentaltown, because there's some threads on Dentaltown. What should I be reading? And right. I've listed my 30 top favorite books. So get on Dentaltown and start doing that. Ryan or Tanner, thank you so much for your time.
Great.
And I look forward to hearing from your transition team too.
Sounds good.
Okay, buddy.
Take care.
See you in Ahwatukee.
Perfect.
Okay, bye.
See ya.